They called her outrageous, obscene, a walking provocation wrapped in raw meat and rhinestones. But that was not the secret. Before the stadium roars and the Oscar spotlight, there was a girl at a piano who kept hearing no. Every spectacle you remember was a shield. Every costume was a weapon. The blood on stage was easier to manage than the bruises you could not see. She studied the architecture of fame, then built a castle around her pain and invited the broken to live inside it. The industry tried to shape her into something safer. She answered with a manifesto disguised as pop hooks. The world saw shock value. She saw survival. Tonight, we pulled back the curtain on how Lady Gaga turned humiliation into ritual, how the altar of applause demanded a sacrifice, and what it truly cost to keep the lights blindingly bright.
Lady Gaga was not born on a stadium stage or in the glare of paparazzi bulbs. She was born Stefani Joanne Angelina Germanotta in Yonkers, New York, in 1986. The neighborhood was ordinary, but inside her parents' home stood a piano, and by the age of 4, she was playing it with a hunger that startled her family. By 13, she was composing ballads. By 14, she was performing in downtown clubs, long before she was even legally allowed to be there. The early 2000s were a time when pop was dominated by sleek, polished idols, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and boy bands that fit a predictable formula. The music industry rewarded conformity, and executives were wary of artists who strayed too far from the mold. When Stefani enrolled at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, her prodigious talent was recognized, but so was her refusal to blend in. She withdrew after 2 years, frustrated with academia, and instead haunted the Lower East Side clubs, performing avant-garde acts that mixed glam rock with burlesque, drawing on David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, and Madonna as her North Stars. Her first major break came when she signed with Def Jam Records in 2005, but it lasted only months. She was unceremoniously dropped, a humiliation that nearly crushed her. Yet it was also the spark of her reinvention. Stripped of validation, she doubled down on her eccentricities, forming a creative partnership with performance artist Lady Starlight. Together they staged chaotic, pyrotechnic shows that drew attention precisely because they were unpredictable. Out of this chaos, Stefani became Gaga. By 2007, she was writing songs for other artists, Britney Spears, New Kids on the Block, the Pussycat Dolls, while shaping her own persona in the shadows. When Akon and Interscope finally signed her, the stage was set for an entrance that would not only break through, but redefine the landscape of pop. She was not going to arrive as another blonde singer in sequins. She would arrive as a living provocation, a pop star who was also a walking performance piece. The late 2000s cultural moment was fertile ground. Social media was exploding. Celebrity culture was becoming more voyeuristic and grotesque, and the public was hungry for a new archetype. Gaga's timing was perfect. When Just Dance hit the clubs and climbed the charts in 2008, she was no longer Stefani Germanotta. She was the persona she had built brick by brick out of ridicule, rejection, and rebellion, Lady Gaga. But within that transformation lay the seeds of future cracks. The industry that once told her no now demanded she say yes to everything. The costumes, the spectacle, the constant provocation. They were not just creative choices. They were survival strategies in an environment that chewed through pop stars with frightening speed. And as Gaga ascended, the question that haunted her was not whether she could shock the world, but how long she could keep shocking before the world moved on.
The rise of Lady Gaga was not a gentle climb, it was an explosion. Her debut album, The Fame, in 2008, was not simply a collection of pop songs, it was a manifesto. Just Dance became an anthem in clubs across America, and Poker Face transformed her from a newcomer into a global phenomenon. By 2009, Gaga was a household name, draped in latex, sequins, and concepts that unsettled traditional pop boundaries. Every music video was a short film, every performance a provocation. The calm before the storm was brief. With fame came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came pressure to escalate. By the time the Fame monster arrived, Gaga was no longer just a singer, she was a spectacle machine.
Arriving at the MTV Video Music Awards in an outfit made entirely of raw meat, she shocked the world, but also trapped herself in a cycle of ever-rising shock value. The escalation was intoxicating and dangerous. Each headline demanded a bigger one. Each scandal required a follow-up. The internal conflict soon became visible. Gaga confessed in interviews to relentless anxiety, to the toll of living permanently in character. The physical strain was brutal. Years of performing in towering heels left her with a labral tear in her hip, forcing her to cancel tour dates in 2013. To outsiders, it was an injury. To insiders, it was a collapse. She admitted later that prescription medication and alcohol became companions during those endless tours, numbing the pain of a body and mind that were both breaking down. Rumors swirled about whether Gaga had peaked, whether she was a fad too eccentric to sustain. Critics began to whisper that the costumes were disguising a dwindling relevance. The release of Art Pop in 2013 seemed to confirm the whispers. Though ambitious, the album was met with confusion and disappointment. What was once seen as daring was now dismissed as chaotic. For the first time, Gaga seemed to falter in the spotlight she had fought so hard to command. Yet within the fall was a seed of reinvention. Gaga retreated from the hyperpop battlefield and sought legitimacy elsewhere. Her jazz collaboration with Tony Bennett in Cheek to Cheek reminded the world and herself that beneath the armor of provocation was a voice of extraordinary power. Still, the shadows lingered. Behind the studio sessions and carefully curated smiles were nights of chronic pain, the heavy silence of fibromyalgia, and the constant echo of whether she had already burned too bright, too fast. The narrative of Rise and Fall was no longer just about chart positions. It was about identity, whether Gaga could exist without the shock, whether Stefani Germanotta could still breathe beneath Lady Gaga's armor. The fall was not a crash, but a questioning, and the question itself was devastating. Was Lady Gaga the character she invented, or had she become the prison she could never escape?
The spectacle of Lady Gaga was dazzling, but the truth beneath was darker than the flashing lights. As the world debated her costumes and her charts, Gaga was fighting a war most fans couldn't see. The years of performing through pain left her body ravaged, and a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, a condition marked by chronic, widespread pain, forced her to reveal what she had hidden behind makeup and choreography. For an artist who built her identity on resilience, admitting to weakness was an act of terrifying vulnerability. Behind the stage curtains, there were breakdowns. Gaga described waking up unable to move, her joints stiff with agony, her mind gripped by panic attacks. Fame had given her a platform, but it also demanded she never step off it. To cancel a show was not just a logistical nightmare, it was an existential crisis. In 2017, when her Netflix documentary, Gaga 5'2", exposed these private battles, it shocked fans who had only known her as untouchable. Suddenly, the mother monster was human, trembling and afraid. There were also emotional scars. Gaga spoke openly about being sexually assaulted at 19, a trauma that haunted her even at the height of her success. The revelation was not a headline stunt. It was a fracture, a raw confession that added weight to every lyric she wrote about survival and strength. When she sang "Till It Happens to You," the Oscar-nominated ballad about assault survivors, it wasn't performance, it was testimony. The media reaction was complicated. Some applauded her courage, others trivialized it as another chapter in her eccentric persona. But for fans, especially the outcasts, the LGBTQ+ youth who had always found sanctuary in her music, this truth cemented their devotion. Gaga wasn't simply an entertainer, she was a mirror of their own brokenness, showing that even icons bleed. And yet the paradox remained. To reveal too much was to risk losing the myth that made her powerful. To conceal it was to suffocate. Gaga lived in that contradiction, balancing honesty with theater, confession with choreography. The meat dress, the flaming pianos, the monster claws, these weren't just antics, they were shields, built to protect the fragile person behind them. But the cost of this armor was immense. Every time she stepped on stage, she risked both her body and her sanity. Every encore was another negotiation with pain. Every award show smile was a disguise over sleepless nights. The world saw extravagance. Gaga saw survival strategies barely holding together. The emotional peak of her journey is not one scandal, not one shocking dress, but the truth she finally allowed the world to glimpse. That fame is both intoxicant and poison. That to be Lady Gaga was to bleed in private so she could shine in public. And that the very persona which saved her career nearly destroyed the woman inside it.
At Hidden Fame, we see Lady Gaga not simply as a pop provocateur,
but as a case study in how modern celebrity culture devours and reshapes identity. Gaga's story is not just about shock value or catchy hooks. It is about survival inside an industry that rewards excess while punishing authenticity. She is at once a master of spectacle and a victim of it. From our perspective, Gaga embodies the paradox of fame. On one hand, she redefined what it means to be a pop star in the 21st century. She brought performance art into mainstream music, challenged norms of gender and sexuality, and gave a voice to millions who felt excluded by traditional idols. Her Little Monsters saw in her not just an entertainer, but a leader, someone who turned their isolation into community. On the other hand, her trajectory exposes the darker mechanics of celebrity. The endless demand for reinvention left her body broken and her spirit tested. The constant need to outdo herself created a cycle of escalation that nearly consumed her. What the public saw as fearless provocation was often a fragile shield against pain, rejection, and trauma. Our channel's view is that Lady Gaga should be remembered not only for her outrageous outfits or her record-breaking tours, but for her honesty when she let the mask slip. When she revealed her struggles with chronic illness, with assault, with anxiety, she bridged the gap between icon and human. That honesty, even more than the costumes, is her true legacy. But what about you? How do you see Lady Gaga? Is she the ultimate pop revolutionary? The symbol of creative freedom at any cost? Or is she the cautionary tale of how fame demands sacrifices too heavy for any one person to bear? Does her story inspire you to believe in reinvention? Or does it warn you of the hidden price of ambition? At Hidden Fame, we do not settle the debate. We share the story in all its contradictions and leave the final judgment in your hands.
In the end, Lady Gaga's story is not just a chapter in pop history. It is a reminder of what it costs to live beneath the blinding glare of fame. Behind every costume change was a woman aching in silence. Behind every anthem that filled arenas was a private cry for relief. Fame gave her a voice that echoed across the world, but it also demanded that she never stop singing, even when the music hurt. Her legacy, however, cannot be reduced to the scandals, the headlines, or even the awards. It lives in the lives she touched, the misfits who finally saw themselves reflected, the survivors who felt less alone, the young artists who believed that art could be both shield and sword. Gaga may have built her empire out of spectacle, but the foundation was always her vulnerability. That is what endures. Some stories are remembered for their glamour, others for their tragedy. Gaga's is remembered for both the rise, the cracks, the fall, and the resurrection. And as long as her songs continue to play, so too will the question she left us with. How much of ourselves must we sacrifice to be seen? How long can the lights burn before they consume what they illuminate? Some stories were never meant to be known, but now you know. And if you want to keep uncovering the secrets behind the spotlight, remember to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Fame, for there are always more truths waiting in the shadows.